Hello, all, and welcome to Echoes of the Atrium. We are your Library of the Untold podcast. Your Discord mods and Discord members of the Library of the Untold YouTube channel are founding father Joey Phipps, anointed and approved all of these messages here today. We're going to go over one of his videos, System of Control, how we think in herds and why we shouldn't. Classic. Here with you and I today are our Discord mods and members. Cregon, say hello.
Hey, say hello.
Cregon. We got Crispy's first ever.
Hello, it's my first ever. I'm so excited. I'm super excited even.
All the way from the Netherlands, that guy. And in London, we got Soul rejoining us for his second podcast.
Hello.
And then Spooky in Vermont, bringing it in for New
Hello.
England. And then, you guys know me, Nick Oracle. Your master librarian. And here we are to be posted on the sister YouTube channel for the Library of the Untold, which is called the Library of the Unknown. Okay, you guys ready to go?
Yeah.
Ready?
All right,
Now,
let's break
this
it
is
down.
one of his better videos. Yeah.
It's an oldie but a goodie. Can you turn it up a little bit, Cregan?
Can y'all hear it?
Nope.
There's going to be an echo. Hold on.
Okay, the echo's gone, but I can't hear the video now.
Yeah.
Can you hear it
No,
now?
that's not- Nope.
Nope.
Well,
Now I hear it. But
Yeah.
the echo's back.
Facepalm.
Mr. Burns.
Systems of Control right here. Let's play it.
Okay,
Let me know when y'all want to stop.
All
yeah,
right.
we'll jump in.
Milgram's experiment on obedience to authority is one of many examples that show how humans will give up their own dignity and override their own moral compass to appease the agenda of a so-called authority figure. In short, a participant would deliver an electric shock to a person in a separate room who could not see them, but the participant delivering the shock could very well see their own victim. When the learner in this experiment would get a question wrong, the participant would touch a button that caused the learner great pain. The more they got the questions wrong, the higher the voltage became. While watching the learning subject writhe in pain, sometimes to the point of begging to be let out or even dropping onto the desk seemingly dead, the participants would agree to continue hitting the button to deliver the electric shock. None of the participants took pleasure in delivering this pain. In fact, the majority of them would end up crying, trembling, and in a few cases even go into seizures due to the guilt from inflicting this torture. They simply didn't want to do it. And in a way, it was just as torturous to the participant as it was to the learner behind the glass. So why did they continue hitting the button despite completely knowing better within their own psyche and guts and soul altogether? Why would a person go against everything that they believe in as right or wrong and continue torturing an innocent person while understanding 100% how bad this activity or experiment was? Well, the reason they complied is because somebody told them to do it. It wasn't somebody wearing flannel like Mr. Ballin, and it wasn't somebody wearing a regular t-shirt. The person telling them to torture this innocent person happened to be wearing a lab coat. A lab coat that represented a figment of being in charge, a personification of authority. This study was not completely unethical. The learner behind the glass being electrocuted was an actor. The real learner in this study was instead the participant. Surprisingly, after the details of the study were revealed to the participants that they were indeed the actual experiment, most of them, through a gigantic sigh of relief, did not regret participating in the study. In a way, they had to face themselves now and be confronted with the fact that they would do absolutely heinous things if a person in charge gave them the permission to. There are many of this kind of study, some of which we will go into later, and believe it or not, this does get worse. But these studies yield yield results that are important for every human being to be aware of. It is important because the participants in these studies is you. Of course, you and I would never torture an innocent person because a figure of authority gave us permission to, but how can we be sure of that? How can we be sure that we, that is you and I, actually think for ourselves and are not subject to this brand of persuasion? Although these experiments are important, I don't think we necessarily need them to understand the results if our eye is open enough. Let me explain. I was in the checkout line at the local gas station, stuck behind a unit of ignorance on legs that was obsessed with which scratchy lottery was going to get them through their day. The much needed and necessary attendant at the gas station was long necking it out of the front window every free moment that he had. This sparked my curiosity enough to ask them why they were so distracted by whatever was happening outside that window. This person informed me that he was looking out for drive-offs. It turns out that if somebody steals 20 bucks in gas, that money comes out of the gas station attendant's paycheck. He had already had 2 that week, and if this activity continued, he would practically be working for free. Despite companies making billions of dollars on fuel, a person making damn near minimum wage is jumping through hoops in order to make sure that they do not get robbed by his own employer. This is a person just like you and I, who needs to feed themselves and their family. When this person politely informed me that part of their job was to look out for drive-offs, it caused me to ask the question, when? I was asked to repeat myself. They said, when what? Well, when are you supposed to look for drive-offs? You attend the register, you make the coffee, you mop the floors, and a million other things that going in the back where all the magic happens. All the while, people are getting gas the entire time in multiplicities. At what point are you supposed to stop your duties to the station and become a security guard for these mega corporations? The realization that their job description was not only inhumane, but in fact absolutely impossible. To put it bluntly, the company that he worked his ass off for found a new way to rob him. Not rob him for their own benefit, but for the benefit of the corporations above the owners of the station. They say shit rolls downhill, but this essential employee was breaking his back on behalf of people who are currently on yachts eating shrimp that are hopefully completely full of shrimp feces, as
Okay,
they
you want
well
to stop it there?
deserve. But I digress.
We need to have a
Yeah.
discussion on shellfish.
Nature versus nurture on this one. Very interesting concept.
So
I'm in love with crustaceans.
I'm vegetarian, but the okay, so the first thing was that the experiment, right? The shock experiment.
Right.
I want to talk
Yeah,
about
that
that.
was it's fucking outdated, is what it is.
Well, it's not clever, okay? There was an actor pretending to be incredibly hurt. There was an actual participant inflicting pain voluntarily. I mean, okay, first of all, you give me a button, I'm gonna push the button, right? No, I don't
It's
care what's on the
creating
other side.
shock. It's creating shock inside the psyche. It's allowing the inner child to come out and change how they, perceive reality and how they react to reality. That's all it is. It's training a human to react a certain way.
Okay, but so they were given directives though, right? They were like, every time they answer wrong, you push this button and it gives them electricity. Okay, I know
Right.
my job.
Which they were
That's my
not
job.
forced to do, though. There
Everybody
was
was
no
volunteer.
repercussions. There was no repercussions for not pushing the button. The only thing that happened was the scientist would stand back and he would say, "The experiment must go on." That's the only thing he would say.
But
That
a
was how the
child
experiment went.
a child doesn't understand the why you would kill. That comes later in life. That drive. I think it's like an
But
archaic
I do
kind of
think it's fair to fully explain the
instinctual.
experiment.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So like the idea was that they had a series of buttons, I believe it was 1 through 10, basically lined out in front of them. Scientists in the back, they're in a room, they could see the actor in pain through a glass panel, effectively, like a one-way panel. And the last button was actually marked with skull and crossbones, I believe.
God.
So Yeah, that's what like it kind of plays into what Krigon was saying about it's training. It's literal domestication, right? So just because there was an authoritarian figure in the room at that time, of course, this was originally done in like the 1950s, 1960s, I want to say. So this is what I mean. It's outdated because like the education and the society back then is much different from what it is today. So I have a feeling that experiment would go much differently now. But you know, the idea was that there was an authority saying that this procedure must continue, and that person would just kind of fall into line and complete those orders based on that they were releasing their judgment to the scientists, essentially.
I
So
don't-
my thing
I'm
is
sorry, I
like,
didn't mean killing, I meant violence.
oh yeah. Well, so my thing is like
Violence
you have
happens
free
all
will
around
the
the
whole
world.
time, right?
Yeah.
Were they
Sorry,
getting
Nick.
paid? Were they getting paid for this? Like you
I,
don't
I
get
don't
your
know.
$300 if you don't keep pushing the button type deal?
That's not part of the experiment. I don't know how they got people to participate in the experiment. That is something I'm not privy to at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know either. But just the whole concept of it is like if you keep pushing this button, you can affect this other person's life.
Yes,
You know what I mean? Like
Or
in such
end
a
it.
manner.
or end it.
But
That was the point. Is that people went to 10.
Yeah,
but
I'm
it,
curious, was that the full point of the experiment that, there was a seeing if somebody would press the button or
It
what?
was That was well. So the actor was not actually being shocked, right? There was no one that actually got hurt, but the person thought that they were electroshocking this person
Okay.
upon given wrong answers. Um, and this was conducted. I don't know if this was conducted outside of America either. So that's also another thing to note.
well, America would definitely host and finance some shit like this. But it actually
Oh yeah,
does actually play into them planning for, the digital metaverse takeover type deal, right? So
yeah,
essentially you are doing the same thing from the other end of your computer, right? Typing in your keyboard and attacking people and destroying their lives and whatever. Like it's the same thing that you do online now.
Psychological conditioning, that's all it is.
yeah.
It happens
Yeah.
in every society. Some
Right.
societies around the world are more violent inherently, and they raise their children to be more violent, to hate. And it all comes down to nature versus nurture at that point, because you can train an adult to hate.
Yeah, you could train a child to do anything.
Well, even an adult that may have the greatest morals in the world, you can give them such trauma that they will be as violent as anybody, that throughout history that was super violent. It just is
But
how our
you gotta know where
minds are
that line
built.
is. You can't cross that line where you kill their will. You know what I mean? Like to be violent, to rebel, to fight back, you still have to have some type of hope and some type of will, right? So if
Revenge
you're
blinds
At
Yeah.
that point, the
Yeah.
psyche isn't like developed into that the world is these systems you should follow.
Well, for
But
children, yeah, but we're
it
talking about
feels like a
adults.
game. Like children feel like it's a game somehow somewhere.
Well, dopamine is a great way to condition the human brain for consumerism here in the United States. That's
Right.
what children are raised on, is to be conditioned to buy junk they don't need all the time.
Yep.
And all that does is keep us in the system, this prison. We're always working harder to make more money to buy the next big product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Advertising is set up to make you fear, to shock you, to condition you to buy new products that you would otherwise not want. It's all psychology at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, I
Yeah.
participated in a study, an advertising study for like a marketing class when I was in college. And you sit in this chair and you watch these advertisements and you have this like helmet on, like that is connected to your certain points on your head that like reads your brain waves. And then there's like this, laser thing in front of you that's like recording your eye movement and shit and your facial expressions. So you watch
Holy
the
shit.
advertisements and it records, change in your brain with patterns or whatever, depending on the colors
Yeah.
that you're seeing, depending on, whether it's family oriented or whether it's adventure oriented and all that shit. They take all that data down.
I've heard that they're
You
actually
can notice that.
considering that, like
They do
making
it now.
advertisements that, pay attention to if you're making eye contact with them. And yeah, that's kind of scary, to be honest.
That's like, what was
I
that
didn't even know
movie?
that.
They
I
do
was
that with
making
the scrolling on YouTube. So if you were to stop on an ad just for a brief second, like for
Oh, it starts
guys, if
playing.
you see a half-naked chick on there, you're gonna kind of stop because it's a natural instinct. But they will gauge that and they will be able
Right.
to serve you better targeted ads that way.
Yep.
And then it's
They
on your
literally
your
time
last
you.
viewed. Right. It like stays in your like
the
previously
Grand
viewed.
Pacer test is a
Yeah.
multi-test. Oh, but yeah, you can notice that in the ads. It's like it really like you can like look at it like at the details of like an ad. You can just see how it's like how they're trying to play with your like subconscious.
Well, they all are.
So,
I mean, it's like it's the point of advertising. Like, it
yeah,
is legitimately the reason why advertising exists is to psychologically try to move your judgment towards their favor. Right. That's the end goal.
Make you desire what you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you need it or not. I mean, like any type of advertisement. I mean, we can trace this all the way back to basically like I want to say the Dust Bowl was like one of the first big cases of it where flower companies. So like remember like the idea of like kids like wearing flour sacks to school was real, except that the flour sacks had patterns on them, and women would buy specific flour brands because they were using the flour sacks to sew new clothing for their children. And
Oh.
so the brands that had the nicest patterns ended up being more successful than the other brands. And that like set off this whole wave of like, holy crap, like we can just like do weird stuff to our products and like it'll sell better.
And the same
And
thing with
yeah,
like diapers now too. Like it's diaper. You buy it's trash. You buy shit in it have to have decorations on it. No, you know who
right.
has the best selling diapers is with cartoons on them.
Right. Well, also because they're advertising. They advertise much more than than the average diaper
But here's the
company, I
thing,
would say.
as a mom, if I'm already trying to potty train a child that wants to run away from me every time I pull a diaper out, if I pull the diaper out and there's their favorite cartoon character on it, they will willingly put that thing on.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And
It's
Yeah.
that's
literally,
worth it.
pro- I just see it as professional hypnotism at
It
this
is
point.
at subliminal levels as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
it's like in the nuances of like how they speak, even the way they speak, and like
Well, yeah,
the way
everything's
they
canned.
look at you, the way they look at you, the way they wink at you, the little muscles in their face, all aligned to make you buy their product.
What
Um,
about the other thing, the gas station attendant guy?
what about them?
Okay, so I'm a career bartender. Okay, I've been a bartender for on and off for 17 years, right? Bartending, serving warehouses. But my profession will absolutely charge me for the total of the tab if you dine and dash. That comes out of my tips.
Right.
And it's the same
That's
thing the gas station guy. If somebody
yeah.
steals gas, they take it out of his paycheck.
I wouldn't put up with that, but like, you know,
But
I'm
they
not a
all do
bartender.
it. You know what I mean? It's not like you can find a restaurant that won't do you that way.
Right.
If somebody, wastes your time, that's your fault. You weren't paying enough attention, right? And I can see that, as one thing for the restaurant business, because yeah, you should pay better attention to your tables. But in a gas station, when there's one attendant, are you kidding me?
I don't think it's right either way. I think the company should be at fault for anybody stealing, but like I mean, I've never been in that situation. I don't think I would put up with that, to be honest. I'd be like, I fucking quit.
I mean, if that's an option, but then you go to another place and they have the same rule, so it just
Yeah,
costs 2 weeks training.
I mean, my company didn't pull that kind of stuff. They were just like they were shitty in other ways. The janitor company that I was working for, and I quit and I found a better company that was like it's way better. So I mean, like, and they also don't do that. I personally I've never had my wages cut ever in my life, and I would probably walk out of any company that did. But that's like I said, I'm not a bartender. I'm not those within that kind of sphere.
I think it's less about the wages, but just more of a systematic issue with capitalism in general. Like, as somebody who works in retail, I'm faced with quite a lot of these same issues. It's not that they would take anything out of my pay, but the expectations that I guess the company has for its employees, just like Joey said in the video, borderlines on impossible sometimes,
Well, it is impossible. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a reality for
yeah,
sure. One of my managers told me when I was a janitor, he had talked to me about it. He's like, yeah, the inspections, blah blah blah, this and that. He was telling me about the upper management, what they were saying about it, and they were like, yeah, there's always something wrong. You cannot get 100%. You cannot do a perfect
yeah,
job. There's always something wrong. So literally, our job was impossible, and that
yeah,
was just a way of eking out the most possible amount of work.
yeah. And I think this is stemming from, for whatever reason, people trying to see all of these companies and just businesses as kind of like automated more than human. Like, we're creating all these systems and all these things of how things should go on paper, but we're humans at the end of the day, and humans are carrying out these tasks, and they're not able to do all of these things.
And so you have
Right.
opposite effect, which is what we have nowadays in the workforce, no matter what field you're in, but specifically in service industry, is that post COVID, you can't get grown-ups to work.
Yeah,
In this restaurant business or whatever, in this hospitality business. So you have to settle for, teenagers that have no work ethic and would never be able to meet this impossible standard. So now I can see it being like a useful rule to have and not really terribly reinforced, but it's like a rule that you have where, like, just like a warning thing, like, hey, pay attention to your tables, because if you don't, it's coming out of your check. You know what I mean? And like, it makes sense now, but like back then, I don't see that bit. It's just cruel at that point. But they're just so used to it now. We're just so indoctrinated into
yeah,
that, like you said, soul, that capitalism, you know, monarchy
yeah,
situation where, like, you're not the boss, so you're replaceable.
exactly.
Right.
I
Now we're
think that's
starting to
the
get into politics at this point, and let's not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
so fair
continue
enough.
with the video.
Fair
But
enough,
it is
Captain. You
how it
play it.
works. That politics works like with herd thinking, right? With
It does fit in, yeah.
subliminal,
Yeah,
subconscious. But sometimes the politicians aren't always super smart, right? If you look at like call it the first room, if the second room in our political system here in the Netherlands, like you. But these rooms with these circles of politicians and sub politicians, you have all these rankings, um, prime minister and ministers. But basically, there is created herd thinking too. Like, you think they may know a lot more than you, but they kind of like don't, right? They fall into herd thinking. Like recently there was something about like there was a tweet posted by one of the ministers, and and the tweet wasn't in line with a bunch of stuff, and then it went like had a whole like live meeting about this one thing, and we're all so aggressive to each other. It's like really like and it also could be faked, right? All this stuff just for entertainment,
This
which
is
is
class
coded in
warfare.
this important
He's not
importance.
wrong. But
It's
look,
it's the managerial class that has destroyed everything. The managerial class are people who think they're always right and their way's the only way, and usually they're wrong about everything, but they've been used to it for so long that they can't see any other way or how to move out of their own way. It, Society's screwed up like that right now.
yeah, agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
You want to skip you?
if the politicians are falling into fucking herd thinking. I mean, what kind of society are we going to?
Gene Roddenberry's dream, hopefully.
Yeah. Oh man.
Who wouldn't want to travel among the stars at, warp? Have a replicator that creates everything out of thin air.
Me. I
Yeah.
would. Yeah. Just
I
I'm
like
that.
the
Right.
I like the earth and I like plants to eat.
Well, like my body is made of earth, so
Yeah.
it also consumes earth and produces earth waste, and everything about my body requires earth. So I'm good here. I'm gonna stay here.
Yeah.
You're
I'm on that
we're
boat as
actually
well.
all in a fucking cryo chamber, and we're headed to fucking Jupiter.
Well, not headed. Well, the solar system's headed somewhere.
This is not
Like-
real. Reality is not real. We're in a fucking cryo chamber, right?
It's an
Okay, fair enough.
illusion made by our brain, basically. Everything you're looking at around you has already happened. It takes time for photons to bounce off of the object that you're looking at into your eye. But usually, the weirdest thing is your brain's already reacting before you've even consciously realized it. Before
Yep.
you've made a decision, the brain has already decided what decision it has made. The consciousness is different from the automation of your brain. You're automatically conditioned to make certain actions subconsciously. But when you're aware of that, there's a time delay. Everything
Yeah.
is happening before you're aware of it.
But then also it goes back to the tetragrammaton too. It's like the sequence of events is fire, water, air, earth, right? So spirit and soul, and then consciousness, and then body. And that's the sequence of who receives the information, right? In that order. And it just
Yeah.
takes a minute. Everything that your body interacts with is an effect of a cause created, 3 sequences ago.
Well,
Your
consciousness has no.
electric field is also interacting with a bunch of stuff and pouring that into your idea soup.
The
Yes.
consciousness
Mhm.
is separate from the physical. So what consciousness has no persona. It's just our awareness of what we're, visualizing, what we're seeing in front of us. Our brains are the apparatus. Our consciousness are just observing without any judgment. It's our brains that have the judgment.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, it's like we're not just seeing things, it also takes time to interpret what you're seeing.
Yeah. And then have a reaction, like interpret and then make
Yeah.
a plan as to what the reaction should be, and then to carry out that plan. Like it all happens very slowly.
I
If you
think
look at
what
it.
Krigon is alluding to is there was a recent study, I mean, maybe it was like last year or something like that, where they tested how people's brains were reacting to certain stimuli and things like that. And it was basically proven that the brain was reacting before the stimuli was even happening. Right. So like there's some kind of weird judgment making scheme going on that's been detected. through neurologic studies. I believe that's what Cregan is if
Yes,
I'm not mistaken.
exactly. But I mean, there's other implications involved in that. So if you're just the observer, you're like watching a movie, and your judgments are not your own. Your
Right.
consciousness is its own entity. Your observations, it's the I. I don't know if that actually affects anything at that point, or if it's just observation completely, totally.
And
Maybe like it's a
also
layer
makes you
cake,
think
right?
like it also makes you think like what slice of time are you in at one moment? Is that slice an nth of a second, or is it
Well,
maybe a few seconds long? Is it
time is infinitely divisible, right? Because the measurement doesn't exist, right? That's the illusion. But like also that time, you can, if you think of time as geometry, it makes it a little bit easier, right? So like instead of trying to think of time as like the straight line, it's more of like a geometry that restricts things around it. And so
yeah,
actions or
it's
condensation of energy repels that or
skyfish.
attracts it in certain situations. But
The Emerald
I don't
Tablets
know.
say that time is the force that holds events separate. Time is not in motion. Our consciousness moves through time. That's what the Emerald Tablets say.
It's a
Yeah.
kaleidoscope. You're turning a kaleidoscope, and all the material is already in the kaleidoscope. Just have to turn the thing.
Yeah.
Tower already exists in a kind of energy cycle that you're moving through. There's all these other different timelines you could be aware of.
Time is relative,
I
not
don't quite
local.
know a lot about alternate timelines because we can't. If they were there, they do like exist. You could be expanding your consciousness to those realities, possibly.
Time is like a loop to me. I think it's a loop. So if you think of a planet that's 100,000 light years away, it's taken 100,000 years at the speed of light for you to be able to observe it. So
Right.
say there was another Earth in a different time, and that light's just coming back around. I mean, even looking at the furthest place that we can observe, the cosmic microwave background, it looks a lot like what our brains look like. And I recently came to the conclusion that maybe that is our reflection of the divine, our reflection of our creation right there, because we're looking into the past so far, but it's so large and it mirrors the inside of us. How far does that mirror go? How many times it lies down or up, from the macro
Right.
to the micro.
I would say it loops back around. It just never ends. It's just
Which makes
all
sense
interconnected.
it makes sense as to why you forget between lifetimes, right? Because if you had cosmic memory of every lifetime or whatever, it would overload your processor, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think you could. Yeah, like that's like getting into like Dr. Manhattan stuff.
But I mean, like, that's just too much data for this body to process, along with all the other data it's constantly processing. It's
Yeah, just
already, right?
making. Yeah, it's so
All built
abstract
in.
it starts becoming hard to think about. Yeah,
But then, like, how do you react to what's happening in this lifetime if you're full of memories from lifetimes that have nothing to do with this one?
right.
You know what I
It's
mean?
impossible to touch the now.
You wouldn't be able to.
Right. And you're right, it would be Dr. Manhattan at
and
that
it
point.
Right.
basically our third eye is reading our memories, but you people usually don't think about that. Like it's that's the field is streaming through there, the field that holds our memories,
Yeah,
which
and
is
that's a
also
good place for
transferred
it,
into
right?
the body.
That's where we keep all of our data now, is in a cloud, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, a
Yeah,
It would
cloud
keep
I
of
think
unknowing.
the data is stored right in the physical material. Like I don't
that
think
too.
there's necessarily any extra field necessary for that. Because that's how history works, right? We take a piece of a particle and we analyze it. And we say, how has this changed over time, and what was this like? And then we create those ratios in between. That's how we develop history. So that information has to be stored inside there, right? It's there as some sort of code or pattern.
And the same thing with evolutionary knowledge and data. That shit's in there too. Like all of the previous chromosomes that were active, all of the previous
Right.
DNA, junk DNA that we don't currently use now, that we used to use as cavemen or whatever. All that shit's still in there too.
Awkward silence. I love it.
I love it too. Play the
And that
video.
means that our apparatus to read that memory can get oversaturated. It's gonna have like a too high of a frequency, right? It's gonna be oversaturated information. We're not gonna be able to do these what's it called again? When you split a wave into its it has a name.
Like
It's
when
a
you put
math
light through a prism.
thing.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, well,
Are you talking
it's
about
a math thing.
Are you talking about the
Oh.
Fourier transform?
Yeah, the Fourier transform.
I
Our
love the
mind
Fourier
does Fourier transforms with the memory that's stored in the electricity.
That's exactly what the DNA does, actually.
Yeah.
This picture is amazing. What is he talking about in this picture?
Yeah, I think it might actually even be relevant to what we're going on about.
I think
That's
it has a lot to do with
Very
what we're
likely
talking
so.
about right now.
Well, let's find out. I'm
It's
gonna play it.
samsara.
Digress as that karma will catch up to them without my interference. The point is that we don't need these social experiments to understand the implications of obedience to authority. When it comes to those who take advantage of other human beings using survival as bait, pennies for them is the equivalent of survival for this essential employee. And instead of being rewarded, he is punished for something that is completely out of his control. This example is one of many that I am sure you, the viewer, can think of yourself. One might connect the experiments of Pavlov's dog with the bells and whistles of a factory or a school setting. One might come to understand that much like Zimbardo's prison experiment, there is an ocean of gap between two equal human beings, one that dangles the carrot and the other one that is futile in just trying to feed themselves. These implications do not rest solely in the workplace, but instead shines its ugly face in almost every facet of reality. To think that this is an accident is as ignorant as the person in line in front of me obsessed with these scratchy lotteries. This flaw in the system is no accident. We have no choice but to connect the dots at this point and understand clearly that this is a design. Those familiar with this channel understand the agenda of the archons, for example. Those in depth with this channel will understand that those archons are most likely projections of our own consciousness. In this way, I implore to you that there is no better example of this esoteric concept than that which is not esoteric at all. In fact, this is what we call everyday life. And like the primordial man of our last video that just needed to survive the predators thirsting for their blood, we now have a new genre of predation to combat. What is the fire that can make us impervious to this exploitation of our daily suffering? Unfortunately, as Carl would imply, to find that answer, we will have to dive headfirst into the darkness and face the reality in which disturbs us to our core.
Well, that was the old intro.
Oh, I remember
wanna
the old
play
There
intro
you go.
song. I love that song.
Love
All
it.
right, so that's the whole intro right there. I mean, did anybody have anything to follow up with that with?
That was almost not an intro. That was like
That was
a
like,
Well,
yeah, like the normal
a
video.
Well, that's before I jumped on board and dove off the end.
I wasn't bad. I loved it. I forgot that it wasn't the video. Like I thought that was,
yeah, I was expecting the video to continue. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, let's
But
go.
the only thing I wanted to mention was the factory bell, the Pavlov bell, the school bell edition. Back to what Cregon was saying with the subconscious training.
Yep.
I just want to make that point. Like, that is disgusting, and I'm absolutely appalled with our school system, with all of that. Factories, I get it because there's loud machinery going, and you can't hear people saying, "Hey, it's lunchtime," and you're not really watching. I get it at factories, okay? And grown-ups shouldn't be offended by a bell alerting them because they all have phones in their fucking pocket, which alerts them to stop what they're doing, right? But
I cast
children at a
silence on
young
mine.
age, very young age, to be trained in that manner, I do not approve.
Like a tornado siren, everyone is conditioned
Yeah,
to
school.
heed that warning, though. I
Right.
mean,
It's for a good reason.
mhm.
Like no one's sitting here being like, oh, we should get rid of the tornado sirens.
Don't get rid of tornado sirens, but there is nothing wrong with a teacher saying, "Okay, class, it's time to go to the other class."
Right.
You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
literally nothing wrong with that, and it's
It's
just gross.
the
It's
reasoning
a
is
way to
because. Go ahead, Gregan.
School,
it's a way
school
to
comes from a
automate us.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
that I like
yeah.
it.
That's what school does. That school comes from the kind of steaming you ready for the factory. It's almost like a factory school. It was like a factory school.
It's because it was
To
set up by
work, to
Rockefeller.
work.
Yeah, and the Nazis, we
Oh
stole
yeah.
America anyway. America
Oh
stole
yeah.
their education system from.
Yes, more or
See,
less.
but it isn't this one of the many things that about our society that really needs an update that for
Yes,
some reason we just haven't gotten around to?
yes,
That's
Yeah.
why we say steaming you ready. We're steaming you ready. You're gonna be a coal in a machine to drive it.
is that a thing that they say in the
That
Netherlands?
that's not a phrase here.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh shit. That's a Dutch phrase. Yeah, but that
And I
does
just never heard it before.
relate. They say
Uh,
steaming you ready for
I mean,
work.
it makes sense because it's like, yeah, like you're ironing something into position, or you're.
Oh yeah, ironing.
I get the
Oh,
reference.
that's what they mean. They mean ironing
Yeah.
because in Dutch that's also steaming.
Also
Oh, okay.
refining your
Ah,
skills to get you into the workforce, but it's also each each class has their own type of schooling. So the elites, their kids go to a specific type of school and they grow up to be a specific type of person. It's all conditioning. Rich families have rich kids usually. Poor families usually have poor families, and it's that in between. Sometimes somebody can break through the ceiling and get themselves out of poverty. It's very rare. I mean, here in the United States, though, it is more common for us to live upper middle class than be poor, say in Asia. But the conditioning's there. In schools, that's been since the Catholic Church. Really, they wanted to get the kids young as they could to start conditioning them before they started to develop their own ideas.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's
That's how the
also
Nazis
like,
did it. That's how the commies did it. That's how America does it.
I would even argue nowadays school isn't really meant to really prepare anybody for anything. It
Except
doesn't
for work.
seem to be a very good preparation for much. Because like,
Nope.
to be honest, I think it's really just a selling point on college, and I think that's like, I think they figured out a way to put people on a paywall, right? So you just have to keep paying your way up until the point of you get your degree or whatever, and
But even
like, because like,
colleges now have no purpose. They're the same thing. They've
yeah,
raised their
Yeah.
prices. It's all a business now.
right,
It
it's a
is
business now. I don't think it's about education at this point. I think it's strictly about profits.
100%.
And like, it's unfortunate, but yeah, like, not maybe not like your local PTA or whatever, but like,
Your local
up
PTA.
up yeah, up in higher management, it's just like they're just breaking money off of children, and they're
Yep.
preparing them to go into college, which those people probably have vested interests in those colleges, and like, I'm sure there's weird circles that are happening,
For sure.
without a doubt.
100%.
Yeah, when I was like 16, 15, I already realized like, oh fuck, this school shit is not gonna like make me live a good life and shit. It's like not gonna work. It's not gonna give me a good job. People like at that time, like people were doing mukbangs, people making money from the internet. Well, what am I gonna do a job for then?
Well, at this point, the internet was like the Wild West, right? At one point, where it was like you could just like fucking make a fortune if you had a good idea and you could implement it into this virtual world. But nowadays, again, it's just become so corporatized and regulated that there's no other way. You have to follow their algorithms. You have to follow their necessities.
You have to
And
eat
that's
yourself to death.
it's a regulated market, is what it
It
is.
is.
It's
Yeah.
heavily regulated.
It got completely cornered at some point and just got taken
Yeah.
over by corporations.
Yep. Once corporations actually figured out that the internet was going to make them money, then everything went fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The first guys to put naked pictures on the internet were like millionaires overnight, right?
Oh, porn's been going on the internet since like the 1970s, like 1980s, even when the internet was like these weird nerds that had access, that were like hacking phone lines and like doing weird shit like that. There was like 100% porn being transferred, much of it illegal. Like that's like 100% true. I know that for a fact. Like even as early as back as the 1980s, most definitely there was like illegal black market like porn trades going on. It's probably number one thing on the internet.
Yeah, probably still is.
No, I mean like the first thing. Like the internet was developed by like like the science community or whatever, but once it became commercialized, I imagine that the first thing that people figured out, they're like, I can transfer images. That means I can sell images. Boom, like instant market.
OnlyFans.
Yeah,
Instant
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans foot fetish. Let's go.
Pretty much. I mean, like it's been happening
Oh,
with every
fetishes.
technology. So even when cameras first got invented, they would have like these peep shows,
Oh,
right? Like you'd have to pay like 10 cents for like just like a fucking like a 2-second look. It would just like open a slot, right? And you just have to look in the slot and then like it would close after a certain amount of time. It's just a paywall.
Oh my God, fetishes. It really amuses me how that all functions. Fetishes. That's
Fetishes,
so
yeah.
interesting. That's so interesting because like
But
you
we
can get
should stay away from that.
people get fuck no hold on. People get their rockers off looking at people like women stomping with their heels on live rabbits.
Oh my God.
Have you
It's
seen the
crazy.
generational concept about fetishes? Honestly, every generation has a different type of fetishes. This new
Right.
generation has this weird thing with an
Infinite.
amalgamation of animals and ridiculously out of proportion bosoms, and it's really weird. And but if you look at the 40s, they had different types of fetishes. It all
Right.
really comes down to, I mean, what's the biggest driver to success?
Left
It
shoulders.
it is sex. So, I mean, you want to procreate, you want to have the perfect wife, the perfect family, or the perfect husband, or it's always about that sexual urge because that is the strongest driver for humans.
Which also comes back to repressed emotion and trauma. So I want
Aha.
to be like
Mhm.
the
Oh my
general.
God, Melania, you're showing your ankles? God, you
She has some
slut.
sexy ankles, right? But like in the Hellenistic ages, the body type of what was considered sexy would be considered obese to us,
Right.
and
Exactly.
our
That
body
was that was
type
actually
we
true
consider
for a
sexy,
while, not just
right?
in Hellenistic times.
But I mean, like specific, like okay, Marilyn Monroe was 164 pounds. She was
Yep.
not obese, right? I'm talking about like the statuesque pictures of fucking Greek women and art and all of that shit from Baroque sculptures and all that shit. And
That's all fake. Well, it's
apparently
all
Greek
reinterpreted.
men
We'll
were
say.
very differently proportioned as well.
A bunch of the great gods were crippled.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of them. They were like they had like fucked up arms and like fucked up legs and like all sorts
Well,
of crazy stuff.
Hephaestus. I can only
Yeah,
think of Hephaestus off the top of my head, but guess what? He was married to the goddess of love, so fuck you guys.
yeah, that's the point. Is like they had much more realistic approach to how they describe things because the body wasn't being seen as imperfect, right?
Yeah.
They viewed their bodies as part of nature, and thus the imperfections were also perfections, right? Like a tree, right? You don't go around being like, "Oh, this is a fucking ugly tree." No, that's a beautiful tree. Now that's a fucking ugly tree. Like you don't judge trees based on that. Like that's not like a necessary thing of your life. So
Isn't it kind of funny that every society at their peak before their downfall, their sexuality was very out there. Rome, for instance, I mean, they
Whore
were.
of Babylon.
But
that's a
if you
whole
look
other
at
thing. But
warring nations that really are violent, also have this very strict rule about sexuality. It's like if you look at the Middle Eastern cultures, they cover their women, but they're always like hanging each other. They're always bombing each other. I just think it's fascinating that sexuality really does play a huge part in whether or not a society or declining. For here in the United States, we are at this weird transition of declining from our peak, and it's all about the moral values of, whether or not, I mean, we're not populating as much as we used to as well. Our birth rate has significantly declined.
yep.
Um, but if you look at the Middle East, they are having an expansion of population. And I just think it's weird.
Well, I mean, you can take a couple things from that, like because well, these are all Abrahamic Western type cultures, right? Both the Middle Eastern and America are both dominated by Christianity or Islam and Christianity, respectively. Um, but like, and Judaism obviously being in there. Um, but like, they there's a very specific way that the Bible interprets women, right? And that this kind of historical narration of women and what they're capable of or whatever. That's like the headdresses and stuff is because it's basically thought to ward off the woos of men, right? Like if you cover your woman, right, that no one can see what she's like and people can't lust after her. And like it's that kind of a situation. So it comes from a very odd perspective on relationships in that way because like when you go into pagan cultures and other types of cultures like eastern religions or eastern cultures, uh, you have much more open situation on sexuality and things, and then you also have a lot of a declination of anger, you have a declination of hatred and things of that nature because of those necessary things, right? So it
Sometimes it's also.
Doesn't
Oh,
it seem
sorry.
to interfere, or doesn't it affect societies? Because before the newer Islamic religion took over the Middle East, the Arabs had so many new technologies coming out, and it was changing the world. And then the Renaissance happened shortly after, like the advent of guns. Um, a lot of the sexual promiscuity happens at the height of a society. Rome was almost industrialized. I mean, they were well on their way to becoming an industrial civilization, but because of all the debauchery, they could not stay together, and it just came apart from the inside. You have two edges of that sword, or two ends of that stick there. What is too much and what's not enough, because now you're covering up your women and you're blue balling. Then I mean, it builds up a lot of tension, testosterone, and it makes you want to just uh, beat the hell out of somebody, you know what I mean?
Then it's a perspective thing too, because as a woman, being covered it should be a choice, right?
right.
It shouldn't be something that is forced upon you or shamed upon you, right? From birth, right? It's from birth. You will cover your even all the way to your hair because the angels will be tempted by your beauty if you show your hair to the sky. You know what I mean? Like, come on, bruh. What are we doing right now? It should be a choice, is what I'm saying.
And
Yeah,
also, I
it's
think if you're gonna have like if a guy or woman feels like a lack of authority, then they seek that in sexuality. But it can also be where their libidinal drive goes.
Yeah, but
but
my thing about the whole perspective of women in that whole concept is that you know no other way. If you're born in these cultures that suppress women in that way, especially the physical aspect of women, the sexual aspect of women, and you're born into that and you have no idea that there's another option. You know what I mean? Like this is your way of life. It shapes your whole worldview.
And that's nature versus nurture right there.
well, we know that like like clothing and stuff and culture and stuff is all basically nurture at this point. There is some debate between nature and nurture, but most psychologists have come to the consensus that it's a little bit of both.
I mean,
So where do
it's
we
gotta
go
be.
from here? As a society, as a culture, I mean, what does our future look like? I'm gonna ask the big question. I mean, we're stuck in our self-made hell right now, our own prison, our own system of control. And it's not just here in the United States or in Europe, it's everywhere. What do we do to bring this world to an age of enlightenment again? A real one. What does that look like?
I think we're doing it
Historic,
now.
well, yeah, maybe this is a new way. Historically, it's come with a lot of beheadings.
A lot of heads burning.
Yeah, a lot of things get cut on fire, and a lot of people die, and then things
Well,
change.
nowadays, it doesn't take long for a movement to sweep across the world, right? The internet.
Right,
So,
like today, yeah. Nowadays, we have the internet, which is a little bit different. We might have a unique pathway to
I
something
mean,
less violent.
imagine if the
Mm,
Renaissance happened at the time of the internet. Could you imagine?
It
We
wouldn't
I
have
wouldn't
happened.
have
mean,
to be.
Okay, I'm sorry, but
What are you
these
saying, Saul?
okay.
I was saying that we kind of did have a renaissance with the internet, didn't we? Like, look how easily it just swept across the world and completely changed our way of life in the last 20 years, you know?
Yeah, fair
And
enough.
I
it's
gotta
also
say
controlling the
something real
hell out of
quick.
us now.
Yeah, a lot of
Well,
us want to
yeah,
get
it
out of
is.
that situation. Yeah.
But hear me out, hear me out. You was wondering where we going to go from here, and I want to give you an optimistic take. Like, yes, things are quite, from certain perspective, dire at the moment. But if you look at Earth's history and the history of pretty much every single civilization that has ever been, it always has this weird cycle to it where it starts off brand new, where they don't know what they're doing, but they're just getting along. They create agriculture or this or that, create systems in place, and then they flourish based on those systems. Then those systems somehow either get oppressive or cultish or whatever. And then those systems kind of fall, but then, they grow from that, they learn from that, and the new age kind of shows up. So I
It's a
think,
cycle.
yeah, and I don't see that cycle breaking anytime soon.
Yeah,
Yep.
Fair enough.
yeah. Got these supervisors here. I've been too loud sometimes. Like when I thought people couldn't hear me, they did, and they woke up. Which is fucking like I can still play music. I can still sing music with that TV because I can't like. So that's really annoying. So I gotta go in like 10 minutes.
Well, speaking of systems of control, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Whoops.
It's
I
okay,
try to be
Crispy.
assertive too. I don't try to be submissive. Like try to be kind of dominating in this situation. Like I don't try to be nice, you know, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yes, we'll see where that goes. But thank you for letting us know. When do you have to go? How much longer do you have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. All right, let's play a little bit more of the video for.
Yep.
Disclaimer here that the contents of this video involves information that is so vile it might as well just be denied by some people who can't face the ugly side of human nature. If what you just heard in the intro at all is disturbing to you, just choose another video. I will literally not blame you at all, as I myself was nearly brought to tears 3 separate times while researching for this video. But it is not going to stop me from reporting my own speculations on the subject, because I feel it is as important as any other of the subjects covered on this channel. This one just so happens to hurt more. Amongst other experiments to be mentioned is Zimbardo's prison experiment. In 1971, Stanford University split two groups of absolutely biologically equal people, as we are all in fact equal, without question, into dualities. The experiment was actually quite simple. One group was in charge and the other group was not. Those in charge and those not in charge was based on absolutely no criteria other than a person of authority saying so. And in fact, these volunteers even knew that this was a study. Some were made to be guards and the others were made to be prisoners. And this was of course known to all to be make-believe. Those deemed as prisoners were stripped of their individual identities by being dressed similarly. So, unbelievably so, on the first day of the experiment, those deemed as guards began abusing the prisoners by having them stand for obnoxious amounts of time, and in one case would spray them with fire extinguishers. The so-called prisoners in the experiments who did not enjoy this treatment were quickly put into solitary confinement, which was made up by the so-called guards. But they were in charge, so that's what happened. Zimbardo expected the experiment to last for a couple of weeks, but within the first couple days, a nervous breakdown took place within one of the prisoners, despite being told he could leave at any point. The other prisoners were coerced into chanting various low blows to the prisoner's character under the impression that they would be punished for his weakness. When the man who had that nervous breakdown heard these chants, he was so humiliated that he decided to stay in the study against his own will, but also very much to his will. All of a sudden, he was not going to leave his other prisoners behind, despite the fact that he could leave anytime he wanted, and so could anyone else. The researchers, including Zimbardo, had to reassure the man that this was not real and only an experiment. But despite being reassured that this was all make-believe and that anyone could leave at any point on their own accord, the abuse went on and became worse and worse. This study was shut down in under 6 days due to ethical reasons. At this point, I would like to remind you that these subjects were picked at random and were regular people, exactly the same as you and I. When I was researching for this video, I was expecting results more like the groupthink experiments, where people would choose an obviously wrong answer because everyone else did. But unfortunately, this experiment, like many others, had absolutely heinous results, some of which I will not mention here on this channel. In both of these experiments, there were, loosely speaking, some common denominators that caused the results that surprised us all. Even though these common denominators are not universal and do not necessarily apply to each specific study, there does seem to be a common theme, and I will list them here. One is that the commands were given by an authority figure rather than another volunteer. Two, the authority figure was present in the room with the subject. 3, the learner was in another room, or in some cases separated by sunglasses, reducing eye contact. And 4, those subjected to the mistreatment were under the impression that the authority figures were legitimate, despite some cases even being told that they were not. But in all cases, people would justify their behavior by blaming the authority figure rather than themselves as individuals. There is also this reoccurring theme of not wanting to be rude or to offend the authority figure, even if it was made clear that it was a game. And then there is this so-called foot in the door phenomenon, where people will obey easy orders at first and then feel overwhelmingly compelled to obey more and more heinous acts as they increase increase in degeneracy gradually. They don't seem to notice when it goes from bad to worse, or be able to draw a line between a game and a complete lack of ethics. When the commands are set up in a motion of going from small to big, they just don't know when to stop. Very much like our video entitled Transcending the Circus World, we are hypnotized and programmed to believe that this is all normal and that the puzzle pieces fell into place on purpose by somebody who is wise. Well, no. It turns out this is all chaos and we are organizing it with our turmoil the best that we can. With an open eye and a clear mind, it is not hard to notice that 99.9% of us get our main source of income from the very same egregore that has charts and graphs used to study and figure out new ways to steal that same income back from us. Basically attempting through research of psychology and science to get more work out of us for less means of survival. Ironically, the very same survival that it takes for us to do the work. They are biting themselves in their own ass without even realizing it. Meanwhile, we are the ones jumping through hoops. And you bet your ass, just like the circus, those hoops are on fire. Regular people, just like the subjects wearing lab coats, can make people do terrible things.
Hey,
Regular
can you
people
stop it
who
right
are
there?
Yeah.
I really like this chart.
It's
You guys
very
see the chart?
intimidating.
Well, so here's my thing. The fact that it's charted out is kind of helpful, but then if you look at it, it's like kind of a functional plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you got your physical, your emotional, your spiritual, your residual, your social, all the bases are covered right there, buddy.
Oh yeah, yeah, more or less.
So what do you guys think about the prison experiment?
You
So-
The,
know,
the Russian
Yeah.
one is pretty interesting too. It's like,
yeah,
what do I say about that?
I
Yeah,
didn't
go
think
ahead.
prison was that bad, honestly. It was like a
Wasn't that-
vacation.
Wasn't that bad when you went?
No. It was, you don't worry about the guards, you worry about the other prisoners.
Yeah. And that's another thing he didn't mention. That's a good point, Krigon. He didn't mention
Did you
anything
go-
about battling each other.
yeah, it was a lot of the guards taking on abuse roles. Yeah,
craziest thing about the entire experiment was that everyone in the experiment knew it was an experiment, yet
Mhm.
for whatever reason, they just all got completely enveloped into it, and including the person running the experiment. Like, he had to stop the experiment when he actually realized, when he went home and he was talking to his wife, that he was a part of it, that as much as he knew he was running this research, that actually, wait a second, he was losing his humanity, because he would have these prisoners complaining, wanting to go home, and he'll be like making sure that they don't and that they continue with the experiment, until he actually took a step back and realized that, holy shit, actually people are getting hurt in this.
He knew how they leave any time and they refused to because he didn't want to leave the other prisoners behind. They
right.
want to see this experiment through to the end for some weird reason, and it would have ended
Yeah.
if they all left.
Exactly.
They did sign up for it, right? Like they signed up for this experiment knowing what it was.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what I'm
But
saying. Like
That's why they're all college students as well.
that's what I'm saying. Like, were they being paid for this? Like, what's the motivation to absolutely humiliate yourself in this manner?
absolutely none.
None. Yeah.
Obviously,
In
money.
the world of psychology, there's a lot of free internship type deals, or unpaid on internship, I should say. That's like a normal aspect of, after getting your master's, you end up going into a 1 to 2 year unpaid internship with a psychologist, and that's how you effectively
This
earn
is
your
the thing.
master's.
Oh,
No.
hell
They,
no.
people want certainty, and they like, grab onto these authorities for their certainty. That they need their certainty as quick as possible, because that's how our survival is geared. We need our certainty of our knowledge, and then when we figure out that the authority was a lie, that the authority isn't better than us, then like we're really like, oh shit, like we can do whatever we want. Like,
Is there any follow-up to these people that actually were in that experiment? How are they affected by it now? How were they traumatized
Yeah, I
afterwards?
think somewhere.
Well, definitely, yeah, people were traumatized, but I don't know if they've done any follow-up studies on the actual patients.
the
Isolation is a big one.
dehumanization aspect too. It's like all these symbols that they see of authority all also play into like if like you're gonna have more certainty if a professor wears a lab coat, right? Or if the person in authority wears like a tuxedo or something, gonna have certainty that whatever is gonna happen to you is gonna happen with the right procedures.
What
Right.
symbol of authority? I mean, our society makes symbols for people to wear to give them that authority. It's always the society, the people within it that give this power to other people in the first place. And we all come up with these
Yeah,
symbols to
I
give
gotta
other
go.
people's.
All right. Bye,
See
Crispy.
ya,
Here,
Crispy.
Crispy.
Bye, guys. Hey, I love you.
Be
Oh.
safe.
Okay.
Bye. I want to say it's like also this specifically is aimed at an illegal immigrant, a female illegal immigrant from reading it.
Yeah.
And it really just, you know what, why power and control works specifically on women and women in fucked up situations is because humans naturally avoid pain and seek pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like if the intimidation wouldn't work if she didn't give a fuck. The isolation wouldn't work if she had anything to do other than contact outside world. The emotional abuse wouldn't work if she didn't give a fuck. The economic abuse wouldn't work if she was fully self-sustaining, right? The sexual abuse wouldn't work if she had a giant fucking knife in her hand all the time. So I'm saying if she didn't have any children, they couldn't use that against her. You know what I mean? Like the more you
Power
have, the
fighting
more you have to
power.
lose.
It's true.
So if she was like just I don't give a fuck, none of these tactics would work. But
You're gonna be
because
controlled, yeah.
But you can make
there are
somebody
so
give.
many angles to attack, now any one of these tactics could work on various people. And the harder willed, the stronger willed the person is, the more of these tactics you use at once. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's really power and control is really about breaking the will, is where we boil it down to. If you have too much strong-willed people going on, then they all have their own ideas and they all have their own rights and their own ambitions, and now they're hard to control because they're very strong-willed. But if you raise a generation of easily controlled people, they're fucking sheep, right? They're sheeple at this
Yeah.
point. There's no point in any of that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like what Korean said in the beginning with conditioning. This is why there's
Mm-hmm.
these cycles of conditioning because it makes it easier for people to fall in line.
Yeah.
And
And
I think
yeah.
that's really scary because,
Oh yeah.
like Nick said earlier, if people could actually, if people actually gave a fuck, if we actually cared enough to revolt and to do all of these things, then, we would have more power and more control for us. The systems would have to change. But the scary thing that the system is now doing is that it's removing that from us, like it's doping us up on dopamine and or this instant gratification that we're so numb that we don't
It's
even think
normalcy
about it.
bias. It's called normalcy bias. People
Yeah.
are
Normalcy.
used to
Yeah.
the normal day to
Hmm.
day and being able to get their fixes every day. But if you take it away, then people lose their shit
But
and they
first you have to
will
let
revolt.
them
See?
build a dependency on it.
Yeah, exactly. But you would think that they would lose their shit, but at the moment, the system is currently stripping us of so many, and I mean so many basic rights from
But they're
like,
using that to keep the control so they could you
Yeah,
take a little bit away and then say, well, if you capitulate a little bit, we're going to give it back to you. Here you go. And then they get less, but they get more control, more power.
exactly.
They gain smaller amounts than you think, but they still
Yeah,
gain.
But who
like
they?
well, corporations at this point,
Yeah,
but
at this
there's
point,
other
it's
things.
business elite. Yeah,
But
Yeah,
if you look at Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, he may be from another planet, but he's like a normal dude. He grew up like a normal dude, not like Bill Gates that had access to a
right.
supercomputer and the best
Hmm.
school, growing up. But he's not like that. He doesn't seem like he's like that. He's just a little bit disconnected from day-to-day life.
And
When he
that's the
talks,
genius of it, though. You don't have to take, an alien and insert him as a mole into the system. You take a regular fucking guy, a
Hmm.
stand-up guy, whose data is traceable, all the way back to his birth, and convince him and use him, and he has no idea that he's working, you know what I'm saying, for
yeah,
the system. That's how they do. That's why there's in the military there's that chain of command, right? And
it's true.
the people at the bottom that are doing all the work have the least information.
Right.
Yeah. Like, even if one of us was to somehow create this really successful business or company, suddenly these shareholders will just start to creep in around you, and they'll
Yep.
suddenly be buying their way into your company, and then they'll have a say on how you do this, and oh, we should
well,
have
that's
this
only if you take
policy,
your
and
company public. I mean, you don't have to take your company public, and you don't have
Right.
to have people
yeah,
But
buying these shares.
it's monetarily advantageous to do
money.
so. Right.
Yeah,
So,
Depending
like,
on what
yeah.
your company does, though. I mean, what stops anybody from starting a business? Honestly, what stops anybody from doing anything? Incentive. I mean, if there's no incentive for them to start a company, they won't. If they're happy with the job that they've got, or if there's even self-doubt creeping in, like, can I be able to start my own business and quit my job? Some things, yeah,
It's
I
the
think
boiling
everybody needs
point.
to start their own businesses. I've done
It's
it.
the boiling point.
I
That's
agree.
the tip. No, there's no there's no civil war until it gets to the boiling point, right? There's about 4 years of bitching from both sides. But once it hits that critical limit, that's when everybody explodes, right? Like
yeah,
the in
What I'm
America, we
worried
had
about,
the Capitol Hill, right? They all the freaking Americans went up to Capitol Hill and started to bust up in there and act like they had something to say.
well, that happened a
Which
lot over the whole
which
summer. So,
yeah, but I mean, technically though, it's okay. It's taxes pay for that building and the salary of everybody inside. And you're not going to tell me I can't walk in a building that I pay for. I'm so sorry for your luck, bruh. But also, um, there wasn't enough people, is my point. If there
I'm
had
afraid of
been
what
enough
happens.
people, that would have been very effective. And I feel like it was a good educational moment. If there had been 6 times the amount of people there, it would have had a totally different outcome and it wouldn't have been washed up under the rug like it was, right? If there's a class fly the fucking handle, that shit works. But if there's not enough people at one time to support your cause will not work.
I don't think that would have mattered in that event because people weren't really there to revolt. They were just there to protest and give support to the president that they thought should have won. But I mean, everybody was taking a step back and acknowledging that the election was, the results what they were. I think now though, I think that there's been so many mistakes on the elite, the shadow government, if you will, that people are starting to look at this election like it's gonna be rigged. Like these people are puppets,
I
and
think if you don't by this point, you can just go ahead and give up on life. I'm so sorry. If you feel like your vote counts and they're actually counting your vote and it's not the illusion of choice, I feel really sorry for you and please don't call me.
I think that we've got 2 months in between the election and then when they're actually sworn in. I think that's going to be a very, very tumultuous period of time in the
I think it's
United
all a
States here.
puppet show. Whoever was chosen to become our next leader was chosen years ago, and this is all just a freaking play.
I think at this point it is, yeah. But I
Oh,
think
it's
a lot of
definitely a
people,
play, yeah.
But you know, in America, we have the separation of church and state kind of fallacy situation going on. And then, like Crispy was saying with the Netherlands, and then too in England, where you are, Sol, you guys still have that prime minister situation, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And that's not really like a good separation of church and state situation. Like it's very,
No, it's
they,
still quite messy and vague.
we're supposed to have three different branches of the government that of the federal government, and then we have the state that has its three separate, branches that govern themselves. What we have right now is a giant corporate entity, and it's all ran by this money system, and they can print as much money as they want, and they can pay for whatever they want, and it doesn't matter how much taxes Americans pay now, because it's just being printed. It means nothing at this
right, it's
point.
not backed. It's not backed at all.
I'd like to interject there right at this point, like just so like the reason money is fake isn't actually just because they can print as much as they want, it's because it's a facete system that's based so we like as a country we borrow money from a cartel who lends the country money at interest. So all of our money is borrowed at interest. So whenever they print money, right, they print $1, we owe $1.25, right?
It's
And
the
like
global system that set that up because it's backed by the United States dollar as a traded currency, and the United
right,
States
more of our
government,
social standing.
our notes are separate from that global trade. It's our money when it's valued higher, when there's less of it, people have to trade in the United States dollar for goods and services between countries. I mean, there's no difference from the Dutch trading company that had the same thing. They were the main currency. They would take, I got confused there. Sorry.
You're good.
The money is the number one system of power and control across the globe.
Yeah, yeah,
As soon as
absolutely.
Yeah,
people as soon as people started buying into it, they became dependent upon it. You know what I'm saying? Like
agreed. Yeah.
like was it Pirates of the Caribbean where East India Trading Company captain was talking to Jack and he was like, apparently, information is not the currency of the realm. Apparently currency,
Jack Sparrow.
right?
Where's my rum?
Currency is the currency of the realm now, sir. So there's no more bartering. There's no more doing favors. There's no more being useful. There's no more community. There's no more everybody helping each other out. It's you have these chunks of silver or you don't, sir. You know what I mean?
It's true, and it's so sad. Like, like, I notice it even among friends, how lending money to a friend or even family, like,
Oh, it
people are
ruins
so
everything.
hesitant to it. Oh, it does that. Like, it can ruin entire, like,
What did,
relationships over
what did
that.
Shakespeare said, neither a lender nor a borrower be,
Right.
because that shit fucks you with your whole system. Like as soon as you get
Yeah.
money involved, as soon as you get like even in a relationship, right? You guys are getting along really well and you're going on dates and you're having fun and you really enjoy each other's presence and company. And then you're like, you know what? I love you. I love you too. Let's move in together and wake up next to each other every day. Ooh, that sounds lovely. I want to do that too. And now let's share bills. Oh, wait, but what?
Oh,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, oh, now all of a sudden it's a fucking
Mhm.
issue. You had no problem taking me out to dinner, but you can't pay half of my bills that you live in my house. Like, what are we doing right now? You know what I mean? Like, as soon as
Yeah.
you get money involved, everything goes to shit.
Yeah. And some people even use that in relationships to control each other, you know?
Uh-huh. And that's why marriage is a contract. That's why you got to sign papers on that bullshit, right?
And prenups and all of that.
Yep. It's all systems of control. And I've never been married. Okay. I'm not one to support marriage because everybody I know that's ever been married has also been divorced. But also, it's a bill of sale, is what it is. It's a binding contract that you own somebody. And in some countries, a wife is not allowed to refuse sex to her husband. because she is his property. Says so in the contract that she signed. You know,
And that's also a system of control.
it's another system of control, is exactly what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Now I have paperwork on you. First of all, you get papers on dogs. You do not get papers on people, is where I'm at with that. You sign this paper, so legally you are held accountable and responsible for, half the bills, raising his children, and all of his orgasms. Sorry for your luck, bruh. You just wanted a shiny rock. You
I
got
do
all the things.
wonder if we're moving away from this as well, the idea of marriage, just as a culture. Because even
As Go ahead.
no, I've just noticed that not as many people are getting married lately.
Yeah. I have to kind of disagree. Like, as someone who's married for 10 years, uh, like the contract is between two people, so it's not, it's not you get his stuff and he gets not, like, or whatever. It's not like it's not a one way, right? So I think the contract is really more of a state situation, right? Because like back in the day when people first started having marriages and stuff, you could get married to like your brothers and shit, like just to make formal contracts, right? Marriage was like a situation of like a legally binding contract between two people to share all of their worldly assets. That's
Yeah.
effectively what it was. And like, I'm not saying that people haven't taken it too far and people haven't abused their spouses, but like, I don't think that necessarily translates with monogamy. That's basically just my take on that.
No, I'm not trying to be offensive, Spooky, at all,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I know you're happily married and you have been for quite some time and you're super good with your wife. I have mad respect for that. But you're looking at the choice aspect of it and the will and the spirituality of it. And I'm just talking about the legalities of it, right? Like just the earthly realm situation. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I understand if you're in love with somebody and you voluntarily can get along with them and it's all copacetic, da da da. And the cultural expectation at that point is for you to have this binding contract. Fine, whatever. You don't really do it for the contract. You just do it, whatever, because that's the cultural expectation. What I'm saying is that, like, overall, the whole idea of needing a piece of paper and needing a ceremonial ritual commitment, all of that goes back to the original systems of power and control, where subconsciously it's put into you that, through this ritual, through this person of authority in a long robe in front of you who has, requested and demanded your oath. You know what I'm saying? Like, it all goes back to way back in the day in this religious, legal, like the priest is the same as the judge, is the same as the, executioner. They're all long robed, wearing authority figures that people, just like in these experiments Joey's talking about, feel the need subconsciously to obey.
I definitely agree that like the religious aspect of it has contaminated that idea of like of women being owned and like things of that nature. Absolutely. But I do think that there's still room for not necessarily legally binding contracts. I personally didn't care about that. But like there is a reason, like if I die, right? There's going to be no discussion about who owns my house, right? Even if it's my parents, my brothers, my uncles, my wife gets the house, regardless, right? Like it
And the
makes no
state
difference to what
pays
anybody else
taxes.
says. Like, it ensures that my family will have the assets that they require, like if something were to happen to me as well. So I think there's other parts of it, and I do agree that, like I said, people have abused it, people have taken advantage of other people, and like largely due to religion. But you know,
Well,
I
now
do think that there's
when you
caveats
get married now, you're actually signing a contract with the state. The
with the
state
state,
is
exactly.
joining you. And I got a question. You know why divorce is so expensive?
Lawyers?
No,
Yeah,
it's worth it. I'm happily divorced.
worth it.
I think Joey's happily divorced as well. I was waiting on you, Creon, to tell us the answer to your question. Or did you not have one?
Which question? I had a question.
Yeah, about why divorce is so expensive.
Oh, because it's worth it.
Oh,
Obviously.
gotcha.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't make sense. I mean, yeah, it's worth it, but if that's the case, just don't do it to begin with.
Well, I mean, that's that you live and learn, right? Sometimes you jump into a relationship when you're too young to really understand the implications. I mean, I didn't know that you were just signing a contract over to the state. And I also didn't realize that she would get the house, the cars, the company, the kitchen sink, and I love that kitchen sink. It had the little thing that you would touch and the water came on. But yeah, it's a learning experience. That's what all life is, though. You're gonna suffer until you're not suffering anymore, and without the suffering, you don't understand that pleasure can be fun.
Yeah, true story. But then too, it's about it all comes back to systems of control, right? Somebody made it a cultural expectation that if you are sexually active with a person, you have to be financially and legally committed to them on by contract. Somebody made that a cultural expectation, a religious moral, and it's in the ether now that anywhere you go, it's an expectation and you're some kind of shameful something, if not, right? If that,
That's a Christian thing
Isn't it interesting that
specifically.
it's not
polyamorous?
just Christian though, it's also Muslim. Like they have that belief
Right.
system.
Well, Abrahamic, yeah.
I mean, yeah. But even in China, they have that expectation as well. And, depending, it's not religious specific. You know what I'm saying? And in, I imagine a lot of different places all over the world, if you're sexually active, you're a whore or you're somebody's wife. And those are your two options, right? If that wasn't in the air, if that wasn't a social or cultural expectation, there you wouldn't have to pay so much to get divorced. You wouldn't have to get divorced at all. Fuck ups are expensive, right? And when you're 22 years old and you decide to sign the rest of your life away to somebody who's going to be a totally different person 10 years from now, that's a fuck up in my opinion. That's you fucking up. That's you fucking all the way up.
Society has also changed in that regard in the last 50 years because it used to be the men would screw up more than the women, but now it's kind of gone the other way where there's been so much women empowerment in this society that it's kind of it's tilted the scale and not in a good way where women think the promiscuous nature of women have always been there. I mean, every religion talks about it. But now it's gotten to the point where dating has been screwed up. We're not having children like we used to. And nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to date. Nobody really wants to get married anymore. Not like they used to, because we have no hope for that. We know how society has been set up now, and it's been set up to fail.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not mad about it either. I'm not, okay, look, we are not even 100 years into women having the right to say no or the right to vote or the right to anything. Women just got rights over here anyway. I don't know about in London or the
Pretty
Netherlands.
much the same.
Right. So we're like up 100 years into women having any rights at all. Okay. The fact that in 100 years, the same time it took us to go from horse and buggy to fucking rocket ships, we went from women having absolutely no fucking rights to now, women having all the fucking rights. And it's actually better and more beneficial for your company to hire a woman as a CEO. And you know what I mean? Like women have all the
Depending on
rights
what it
now.
is, but that's the scale issue. It's not a balance anymore. It's gone the other way to the point where some guys are literally mutilating themselves because they can't compete against the women, or they can't compete against their in their own field, so they think it's easier to become a woman because it is now. Society has made it that way. So the balance is no longer there. It's not you're gonna get married, you're gonna be a partner, you're gonna enter this contract, and you're gonna do well together, and there's going to be consequences if you break that contract. It's only the consequences are for the man at this point. This is how society has changed so much. There needs to be a balance. And if that balance doesn't take place soon, I really do think the population is going to just collapse.
There
And it's
never was
happening
a
in Japan.
balance, is what I'm saying. There was never a balance. The fact that we currently do not have a balance is not news. There was never a balance. It's just now in favor of the woman as opposed to in favor of the man, which was what it was all of our recorded history.
Well, a lot of wars were started because of women. I mean, if you think about it, especially ancient wars.
No, you can't blame Troy on Helen, okay? Helen was
How'd you
never.
know?
Look, fuck that. You can't blame Troy on Helen because all she did was be sold off into marriage at fucking birth because that's what she was born for. Okay? She did not do shit fuck else. The one time she decided to think for herself and it fucking blows up everything, right? But you can't blame Helen for Troy. I just false, sir. I disagree. That was Menelaus. That was Menelaus all fucking day.
It was Brad Pitt. It was Brad
Don't you
Pitt's fault.
don't you jump on Brad Pitt. Don't you do it.
Oh my God, that was such a good movie, though.
Ugh, best movie ever.
All right,
All right, you want to play
so
the video some more?
yeah, before I make it too
Those put in
awkward here.
charge of nothing often become abusive like the prison
And
guards
there's
in
the
the
scale.
previous experiment. We give our freedom and dignity away to regular people because they have been appointed that position by absolutely no objective merit. I find it to be true that the real measure of a man can be concluded by what he does with power. What his character becomes when appointed with a pseudo amount of influence dictates who he is within and without. A perfect example of that involves, well, you guessed it, money. A child born to parents with money will go to college and get more money, thus having opportunities for power. They will, in turn, have no real troubles or worry in life, thus creating a void and soulless character, like a sleeper or an NPG. Meanwhile,
Did he just say MPG?
I'm pretty sure he said NPG.
Okay. Oh, he's just going over exactly what we just all talked about.
I know, right? Isn't that funny? But then too, I want to go back to like he was like, you know, the real measure of a man is what he does when you give him power.
Well,
And
it's the
I want to be
hero
like,
story. What he
it's the
just
what?
touched on, the hero story. I mean, you can, every time there's a hero, they overcome evil, they overcome the challenges, but they stop at becoming the hero. They never continue on because they become prideful. They become, so they become evil. And it's always a cycle. You do good, you do good, you do good, and eventually that good becomes evil. Either society turns on you or you turn on society.
I think Beowulf was a really good example of that. Do you remember Beowulf, the story of Beowulf?
Yeah, but enlighten the listeners if they
So
don't
he
know.
was wild and free in his youth. He was, the manliest of men, and he was a monster hunter, and he came to find this monster and battle it and fight it and put its head on his wall because he, had no more challenges left, right? He defeated everything he set out to defeat, and he heard about this great crazy monster and was like, you know what? I could do that. And he went for it, right? Whatever. Turns out, the monster was a deep, dark secret that came with a curse, right? So, long story short, he slays the monster, takes the place of the king, and has to now repeat the cycle of the king's choices, right? It goes past him defeating the monster, is what I'm saying. Like, it shows him what happens afterward. Yeah, he got everything he wanted. He defeated the monster, he became the king, he got the girl, he did everything he was supposed to do, but then it shows the consequences of the sacrifice of the choice for his, that got him what he wanted.
He also touched on Marcus Aurelius, which is a great author, a great leader. Um, it's more or less, speaking of control, it's knowing what you can control and what you shouldn't control. Because some of these systems are in place and the individual can't do anything about it. It's only go along, get along, or suffer the consequences of society. Um, I was going somewhere else with that and I completely forgot.
Well, what I think you can control is you and only you, right?
I
meanwhile,
agree.
an absolutely brilliant mind born to a family without money might end up working at that very same gas station where fuckface is obsessed with scratchy lotteries. This essential employee, in this case overqualified for this position, knows better, and I tell you, I cannot think of a worse kind of torture. And of course that poor child can rise up out of that suffering, yes, but at an extreme disadvantage. He has to sacrifice so much more of his life and health to get where he deserves to be. Like 14 hours of editing.
14 hours of editing.
Cough, cough. While the rich
bitching about
child
14 hours.
goes on to become a doctor
Really?
who ruins health by just following orders, saying, hey, I'm just doing my job. Or in the case of an artist born into money who has no imagination because of his own lack of character, thus painting our entire world more and more gray, despite the meaningless colors that he splatters onto his self-indulged work. It used to be that the artists that died of impoverishment were the ones that we admired, but now it doesn't take much to look at the fine art community to see that the rich spoiled kids of today have taken over, spreading their lack of talent and character and calling it quality. We can clearly see with our own eyes that this artwork sucks. Let's take a look at the second experiment we spoke of, where the
Dude, he
subjects
loves
wore
art, too.
sunglasses.
What?
I said he loves art too. So for him to be like, this art sucks, he means that shit with all of his heart because he loves art.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of modern art, like the stuff that he kind of displayed there.
I don't think anybody is, to be honest with you. It's this equality versus equity. There's a difference, a serious distinction that the leaders of our culture right now just have no concept of. It's you can't give two people the same amount of resources and expect them to have the same outcomes. It's just not going to happen because even if they're born with the same amount of opportunities, they will take different paths.
Right.
Twins are the same way. Twins may have this connection, but if they have the same amount of resources, they're going to take different paths because consciously they are just different. They think different. They want different things. And depending on how things affect them growing up, they will take different paths. Anyway, this
Agreed.
stupid side thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, agreed.
To
Continue.
hide eye contact. People sometimes become despicable when they are behind a veil of identity obscurity, so to speak. This reminds me of road rage and, well, internet comments. I
Stay in
don't
your
see
lane,
a lot
Joey.
of that here, by the way. To be honest with you, it's absolutely staggering. In this particular community, I'm telling you right now that all of you are a real phenomenon. Have been very kind and loving, even during disagreements. Our discussions are worlds beyond what I have seen on other channels, and it's a vibe. It's a vibe. He says it better. The quick side note being that every time I see a hater pop
God,
up,
pause it. Wait, go back there. Go back right there, Krigon. Go back 2 seconds to where it was showing the.
Oh, the wallflower guy.
Yep, right there. Pause it right there. Pause it right there. Boom. That's Jesse.
Who?
Jesse, the dude from last night that was sitting in the chair. That's Jesse.
Oh.
Oh my God. This is insane that we just happened to randomly pick this video. And he was the other guinea pig between me, Joey, and him for the frequency lab.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Dymatics.
That's fucking Jesse. I'm sorry. I was like, I thought that was so on point that this happened the day after. He's
Hey,
cool
you
as
good?
shit. I met the guy yesterday. He's fucking awesome. Sorry,
Nice.
go ahead.
in the comments here, instead of attacking them on my behalf, you guys have seemed to comment back loving support, encouraging them to shed their skin. This has happened without my intervention whatsoever. That is so rare on YouTube, I can't help but recognize it and say, holy shit, thank you. But I digress, and let's get back to more of this dark shit. Everyone is familiar with the studies coined as Pavlov's dog. When a bell is rang and food is dispensed, the dog will begin to salivate even before the food is presented. On a lighter note, this reminds me of ice cream trucks, and for some reason, I feel like I don't even have to explain that. But unfortunately, it also reminds me of the bells and whistles that go off at schools, factories, and, well, within your pocket right now. We have been programmed just like those dogs to respond to a particular stimulus. Once we recognize and understand the stimulus, though, it becomes easy to not only overcome, but to transcend. On an unfortunately darker note, Pavlov did not just ring bells. There are studies that show that when torturing a well-trained dog,
Sorry, I'm eating, but I love this little
Pyramid.
pyramid. Yeah, self-awareness, exploration, discovery, understanding, love. Anybody else want to say anything?
No, I
Yeah,
like it. I think it's
I'll
accurate.
chime in.
What you
Um,
got to say?
so like from most of the video, we've been seeing how control and power is quite corruptive, and how, as a consequence, our society is in quite a state. But I would say it's directly related to this. Like, I think the reason why it's in this current state is because we haven't been, as a collective, making our way up this pyramid. Like, we've just kind of been, when a lot of us ain't even self-aware, to be honest. Like, we're
Yeah.
just kind of moving on autopilot. So, of course, like, we're just moving on those primitive instincts, looking for safety. So, yeah, we really desire money, wealth, power, sex, what have you, because as far as those individuals are concerned, that's all that matters in life.
Right.
But I feel like as you move up this pyramid, those things have less of a hold on you. So that even if you was put in such a prison-like experiment, like for example, those guards could have actually treated those prisoners however they liked. They didn't have to
Be
actually
mean.
be mean.
No,
Exactly.
they did not.
But
Yeah.
that's part of the herd mentality thing too. He's about to talk about where if one of them does it, it gets like contagious. It's like fucking
Yeah.
contagious.
Yeah,
It's
it
true.
really is. It's like cancer.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
this goes into as above, so below. It all starts from within yourself.
Yeah.
You decide if you're gonna be mean or if you're gonna look at this person as being mean to you. You
Yeah.
decide.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they would express that outwards. So all of them would end up like that. Even the prisoners were treating each other like awfully.
Mm.
But my point is that as I feel like collectively we're going through like, well, Carl Jung's unconscious shadow work kind of period. But we haven't actually done that shadow work. I think as a whole, humanity has been through quite a lot of shit. Like it's been quite bad. And we haven't processed any of that. Like we've just been moving straight forward into the dark, hurting, killing, exploiting each other. But what we need to do is actually do the work, like reflect on ourselves collectively and individually. Yes, it begins individually, but collectively, that's where the work needs to be done for us to start realizing that, wait, hold on. Like, we're, we're prioritizing all of this kind of immediate gratification and money and all this stuff, but does that truly matter?
Where do you think we
Right.
are on this
Right.
chart as a species?
Mm.
I don't want to
Self
say.
Yeah.
exploitation. Exploitation. It's below one. So I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah, I would
that's how
say
I feel.
below
Is
one.
that we're not even
Yeah.
at one.
Really? We're not even at one? I would
No.
say we're
Yeah.
somewhere, I would say we're somewhere between 3 and 4. Really? I feel like, okay,
As a
awareness.
species.
I mean, okay, awareness happens when we realize that we are different from cavemen and monkeys, right? Exploration happens when we populated the entire globe, right? Discovery happens when we start to make settlements and cultures and, chill out. I want to say understanding comes next.
well, I think this has to do with the individual
Ye-
self.
Yeah,
No, I know. I'm
this
just
is more of
saying
like
in a
sociocultural
larger.
rather than physical. Yeah.
No, I know. I'm just saying like as a whole, as a species as a whole, you know?
Right.
Mm.
And I think what we're trying to say is like more like on an emotional or intellectual level rather than like, yeah, we've explored the world, and absolutely like that perspective is absolutely valid in this situation from like that type of perspective. But I think we're saying like if you were to take all of our cultures as humans and stuff and put them together, that what level would they be on emotionally or spiritually?
Well, I think it'd be
And
different
that
for everybody, right?
exactly, it is
Yeah.
different for everybody. Like we're not trying to deny that people are at certain levels, but when we average it all together, it feels like probably below 1.
It's so sad. It's so
Yeah,
sad.
I mean,
You
it
average all of
is,
it together, we're still in the negatives.
but
We
like,
have all the world's knowledge at our fingertips, but we don't have the wisdom to use that in a
yeah,
well-meaning way now. We use it to
Right.
exploit each other.
Right.
yeah, because I
Or we're trapped in a
cannot,
prison system. So
yeah, I can't confidently say that, for example, the UK is self-aware. Like, how we can see all of this kind of nonsense pretty much unfolding in front of our faces, but still not have the awareness to kind of realize that, wait a second, we're being had here, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think that still
But
needs some work.
people notice it, but because they're not willing to make the waves and they don't want to do it alone, it does. A lot of
Yeah.
revolutions had one person really lead it. And it only takes one person with enough willpower and self awareness of the world around them to actually make a change.
It's true.
That's what Joey's doing. That's what we have Joey for. That's
Yeah.
literally Joey's role.
All right, I guess we'll continue on.
Okay.
His training will be erased, much like a man named you know who was recently found guilty of dropping beagles off of balconies to study their suffering. A dog that is put through torture cannot only be reprogrammed, but the new tricks, once they are presented after that torture, can actually remain with the dog terminally. This new training cannot be overcome. The tortured being connected to the suffering in the first place seems to override our fight or flight response system. And unlike the previous training, it takes a hold of our core survival mechanism. The people who are in control, in power, understand this well, and make no mistake about it. If you and I have access to this information, so do they. Knowing this, let's just take a simple glance at our news sources and social media. A viewer of this channel knows quite clearly that the news is a programming system to spread fear. We also know that this fear creates a divide and conquer type of agenda, but unfortunately, this goes deeper than just that. Just like the dogs tortured in Pavlov's experiments and you know whose, when we receive this slow drip of suffering from our major media outlets, it is exactly the same routine. A routine now exacerbated after understanding the results of these experiments. When exposed to this extreme amounts of suffering, we empathetically suffer ourselves. This makes us, by all means, subject to being reprogrammed. A programming that, in this case, cannot be undone without bringing the unconscious to the surface of our consciousness, which can be very uncomfortable, but also very necessary. We are not considered people by those who are in power. We are familiar with recent stories of the alien invasions in Peru. The news has repeatedly called these people tribesmen who live in villages, despite the clear footage showing that they live in houses and drive on roads and have lights, toilets, jobs, etc. They are people. They are us. But the news has no problem coloring them in such a light that makes it easy for us to swallow, therefore easily forgettable. Yet, whenever they want to scare you, they tell you that it is your grandfather who is dying on the breathing machine. A dear friend of mine, Michael, was playing a war-based video game on his phone. I saw that he would sacrifice an entire group of digital soldiers for the gain of his own power within the simulation. We have to understand that this is exactly how they see us. They see us as digital NPGs in their own game of power. When they look at soldiers dying in war, it is as if they are looking down on a screen, thus looking down on us. Like pawns on a chessboard, where they are not even kings on the board, but instead they are the players. I assure you, just like the experiments listed above, they are people just like you and I. But I
I played
also
Emery in chess
assure
before.
you that just like
He's
those
good.
programmed to think that regular people are an authority figure, it is easy to be tricked into looking up to them. It's like being mugged by somebody in the street but not calling the police because they are the ones doing the dirty work for those who are coined as authority. Real wisdom that comes from real character and experience seems to be shadowed by those who are in control, sanitizing all information that they don't see fit to their own bias, moral, and monetary gain. Today, we dismiss the lessons of myth and theology, systems which are pure, unobstructed channels of learning and passing down of knowledge and wisdom. Instead, we adhere to systems of confusing technical terms and jargon that place information over our heads. This is so that the information can't be followed to the
Magician.
source. We have laid down our right-sided brain knowing in lieu of our left-sided brain logic. And in some cases, we succumb to the overwhelming power of the lower reptilian brain underneath our mammalian cortex. That reptilian portion of the brain, that amygdala, is clever and cunning but unsympathetic. This portion of the brain is based in a power struggle of fight or flight. Kill or be killed. This biological system is no longer necessary as there is clearly an abundance on Earth for everyone everywhere. I mean, how could we miss that? It almost seems as if information is filtered through a man in a suit and a tie sitting behind a computer who decides on behalf of the men working of what is right from wrong. I mean, it almost makes me wonder if the tie was invented so that the wearer could just hang themselves efficiently the moment that they realize what their life meaning has become in the first place. Oh, no offense to anybody wearing a tie currently. It's a joke. Is it though? I don't know. So take a look at what diamonds have become, for example. We know that diamonds are not rare at all, but we still utilize them as a symbol of love despite knowing better because of public pressure. We are tricked into thinking that there is a bar set, a bar based in money that defines how much you love a person based on how much of your income you're willing to give up for a rock that is abundant in nature, yet coined rare by salesmen in a tie. Salesmen who themselves probably don't know better. But you do. We do. And by acting accordingly, the people wearing that suit and tie, so to speak, selling us the bullshit, will have no choice but to fall into place. Whether it be diamonds, gasoline, time, or anything else. But I mean, I still understand with the diamond thing. Try explaining that to your in-laws, right? Like diamonds, coffins are not needed at all. We are told that if we love a person that we should gladly waste our money on a fancy burial for a corpse of empty flesh where your loved one no
Agreed.
longer resides. Even if it means selling
Yep,
off their
agreed.
valuable goods to put
Dig a
them in
hole,
this
throw my body in. Done.
They're like $4,000
Yeah. Just the
for
coffin
just a
is like
wooden box. For
yeah.
just a wooden. If you, that's not even a
Well,
fancy.
it's a nice wooden box, but yeah.
Give me 10 grand for that.
Yeah,
Some
I
people pay it.
actually was so surprised to realize that they turned death into a business, and
Yep.
very recently too, that this wasn't a common practice up until like recent centuries where
Yep.
it was completely turned into a business where instead of actually just paying your respects, you have to pay for the coffin, the car to drive it, the service, like all of that. There's even payment plans and everything. It's
Mhm.
crazy. Even the
There's
It's
one
a
tombstone.
whole
company.
thing.
There's a company in Louisiana that actually, such a generic name, you would never know that's what they do, but they actually buy plots and they try to sell it and they try to, they're, when it comes to death, they do everything. Like they are controlling everything. And these shareholders or the people on the board are all in the same big global conglomerates like BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard. They're all in the same business, but this one company makes so much money it doesn't actually make sense. It's almost like it's a shell company. They're using
It
death
it is.
to hide money. It's weird.
But it's so
There's a lot of
morbid.
those kind of companies going around.
Like, can you imagine that? One, it seems to be a problem for us to get sick because, you have to pay out of your ass to for whatever treatment, even just a trip. But now even just dying can literally cost their entire family all their money and savings. It's
Right, there's a death
Yep.
dark.
tax.
Yep.
Yeah.
They
There's a,
tax you just
Scary.
for having died. It's the grossest thing ever.
it costs a lot to be born. It costs a lot to live. It
Yeah.
costs a lot to die. But I mean, it's always the next generation that's paying for that next thing. You're
Mhm.
paying for your parents to, pass away, or you're paying your parents paid for you to be born. And
Well, that's how
it
they
gets
get
more
it. That's how
Yeah.
they've done it since the Catholic Church invented that shit when they were selling tickets out of purgatory.
Oh dear.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
Legit. And you could buy your grandma's way out of purgatory. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, what are you
Yeah,
doing
you could
right now?
buy other people's souls out of out of
Right.
hell.
What are you
Basically, it's
that
like
I'm just
crazy.
saying. The
Wow.
Catholic Church started that shit.
Yeah.
Catholic Church started a lot of shit because they wanted to maintain control over everyone.
Yep. For a long period
See,
of time.
but then we kind of have this false sense of illusion that they've stopped when we're
Yeah.
actually seeing a lot of their systems still quite well at work right now. So,
He's not wrong.
You're not wrong.
yeah.
You want to keep going, Tom?
Yeah, they have so much money, so much control. The
Yeah.
Catholic Church, they don't have to pay taxes anywhere. If you're a church or if you form a cult, that's a good idea, actually. I should form one of those. But you don't have to pay taxes on your revenue and
Right.
donations. You're making a business. Yeah, the priest get, get to live in a house tax free. They don't have to pay for their utilities. It's insane how much money they save and also take in from the goodwill of people.
Yeah. Just from tithing, something that's religiously dictated.
Mm-hmm.
The separation of church and state. But that's not really separation, is it? I mean, they
No.
can.
Tithing is not religiously dictated. Tithing was that when they lived in communities like tribes, that everybody had to contribute 10% of their farm yield to the storehouse to get them through the winter. That was
That's
what tithing was. That it had nothing to do with fucking money going to the church. It was about the food and the winter and getting everybody through. You know what I mean? Like the fact that it's moved over to what it is now is disgusting. And there are churches that will literally fuck your credit if you don't tithe every week.
Right.
I love
Right.
fucking my credit. Okay, let's continue on, y'all.
That credit is pretty hot.
Yeah.
Meaningless box, this rectangular cube, a vessel for atoms. This programming is so strong that just by hearing this, some people will become shaken down to their core. And I'm sorry, but we've been tricked. You can bury somebody in your own backyard and by doing so get a tax write-off for your entire house and not have to pay personal property taxes anymore. I mean, look it up for yourself. In the 90s, every news station was prevalent with results
That's
from a
why we're burying
scientific
people
study
here.
that concluded that sugar was perfectly safe. They say follow the science. Well, in this particular case, I say we follow the money because that scientific research was funded by Coca-Cola. Sugar is extremely dangerous and addictive. Science has also shown that a glass of wine per day is actually healthy. And,
Yep.
well, guess who funded that scientific study? We were told that marijuana and psilocybin mushrooms are dangerous based off of real scientific research, peer-reviewed research, only to find out that those studies were funded by Anheuser-Busch. I don't have to tell you that these plants are perfectly safe and, in fact, very healthy in the
Yep.
case of psilocybin, which is extremely neuroregenerative. It makes you smarter. and healthier. But what I do feel like I need to tell you is that unlike what we were told in DARE class, no one on Earth has ever jumped out of a window on mushrooms thinking that they could fly. It literally has never happened in history, which brings us to what we already know about propaganda on the news.
That is,
Propaganda,
yeah,
which is
true.
like the scientific studies, also bought and paid for according to the agenda of those getting their kicks from our suffering, these egregores living upstairs in their ivory towers. I mean, they saw very clearly in the 60s that psilocybin caused us to realize their bullshit, and they quickly made it illegal with these two very specific ways to influence us. Long ago, we were told that uranium is not dangerous to our health, and a lot of people died of cancer because of this. Not so long ago,
Yep.
however, we were told that lead was perfectly safe,
What
and
the ever
despite
living
how
fuck?
many cases came up because of the infections from lead. So, when scientific studies tell us today that fluoride is good for our teeth,
Rome was notoriously infected by lead poisoning.
Yep. Yes, it was. Well, the later Rome, we'll say. There's two distinct Romes. There's pagan Rome, and then there's the Roman Catholic, like
Yeah.
Rome. But
And
yeah,
syphilis was very prevalent in those times.
I imagine a lot of STDs were pretty prevalent.
Well, syphilis wasn't just sexually transmitted back then.
Exactly, you could have gotten
Right.
it from water. But a lot of these newer STDs, for example, I mean, that's a relatively new issue. Uh, that's a whole conspiracy in of itself right there. So cancer really didn't become a big deal until after the 1940s. People weren't really
Yep.
understanding what it was, and it skyrocketed. Everybody knows somebody that has had cancer, or is dying of cancer, or died from cancer. But that's, again, radiation causes that. It skyrocketed right after all the nuclear testing.
Well, it's also processed foods. That's the big one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, a lot of time they irradiate food at the farm before it goes to the store because it preserves it longer. They have these irradiation trucks that come to the farm to irradiate the food.
Well, a lot of different type of electromagnetic bandwidths going through us all the time, like the 5G. There's a whole conspiracy about that. I don't subscribe to half of what they've said about it, but I know that
Yeah.
we have a balance with our electromagnetic field, and when it gets disrupted, it causes all kinds of crazy
Problems.
effects.
Yeah.
I'm doing a podcast.
Yeah, I would agree that I'm not necessarily subscribing to the 5G theories or whatever, but I'm saying like, yeah, like we are definitely bombarding ourselves with a lot of energy, and we don't really fully understand what that's good doing to us in the long run.
Exactly.
But the other scary thing is that even if they do fully understand why it's doing to us in the long run, they might just not care, you know?
That's very possible as well,
Yeah.
and likely.
Because
For
it
example,
could take years.
like, yeah, but we know the effects of smoking, for example, or even alcohol and stuff. Yet those are still perfectly legal, you know? Like they
Well,
even
actually, it's coming up that like now lung cancer is being found not to be caused by smoking. There's a lot of other problems like emphysema
yeah,
and all
yeah.
sorts of
That's
stuff,
been a
but like
test.
cancer was just lumped in there.
Throat cancer too. It's the sample sizes of non-smokers versus smokers. I'm not saying that smoking's not bad for you. I
Right.
smoke. It's horrible.
Definitely a bad habit. We're
But
not condoning smoking whatsoever.
but they've made it far worse than it actually is. Everybody has a vice.
Well, I think they use
But
it as a scapegoat, right?
yeah, they
Yeah.
do. But I also just find it funny that, like Joy was saying, that they've outlawed these other substances, let's say like LSD or psilocybin, all those stuff. They've told us that's completely dangerous. You should
Right.
not touch that stuff. Yet legally, you can still get so many other stuff like, processed food, sugars. As much as we've
Caffeine.
realized how dangerous all of these things are. Yeah, exactly. you
Well,
can still go
marijuana was
crazy.
actually used and studied, and what it did was make people more docile and more easily suggestible. Right after those studies had concluded, they started pushing for widespread, popular culture at the time started pushing it more than say alcohol and stuff like that because it
Mhm.
made it cool. And in countries that have legalized it, they don't smoke it as much because
Right.
it doesn't have that popular coolness to it. But right now, you can see people that have smoked for quite some time, even if it's just once a week, you do see the slowdown that they have, or how you could talk them into things easier than say somebody who doesn't smoke.
I would say it's a person basis for sure.
It was studied, and I know people don't want to acknowledge that, but everything has, good, bad. Alcohol has bad tendencies. It does bad things to your body, but it also has good effects. Everything has good and bad effects. It's just depends on how you use it. Even meditation it just came out with this long study about it, where a certain amount of people do have heightened anxiety, depersonalization. Some people even go as far as having psychotic episodes after meditating for quite a long time. They don't get the benefits as a monk would, and
Well, that's also like a social and cultural shock too. Like, going from having a cell phone every day to meditating is a huge change in the brain and like,
oh yeah.
just their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Well,
You know
that's
what I'm
our
saying?
dopamine addiction is our phones now are developed to give us that dopamine addiction. The way that we scroll, the way that we push the buttons on there. It's all developed in a way to make us addicted, to enjoy that. And when you do take away that, we're addicted to it. We can't
Yep.
live without it. We will suffer. And I think we do need to suffer. We do need to get away from all the addictions.
I agree. Yeah.
All right,
To an
anything
extent, yeah.
else?
No, no.
All right. Just a little bit more awkward silence here for a second. All right.
And oh boy, I can just hear people bitching right now. It doesn't take long to take a look for yourself and find that those studies were done to benefit
Screaming.
municipal waste companies who made it a way to expose of this toxic chemical. If you can't dump it into the environment, what better place to put it than into us and our children? The scientific research, so to speak, that said that fluoride was good for our teeth happened in 1901 based on absolutely no scientific merit whatsoever. And it still rings out to this day. The science was flawed. What is not flawed is the studies that find that fluoride makes mammals docile. All of the sudden, the mouse does not have any urge to escape from its cage, or even care to. Yes, by all means, we should follow the science. That is to say, the science, not the people funding it. Before we follow anything as truth, we should first follow the money. And no, I'm not going to mention what you are thinking of right now because I want to keep my channel. And hey, being that you are already thinking of it, I don't have to say it. But still remains the fact that many people are still unable to hear it. And when I say unable to hear it, I mean exactly that down to the word. I am not saying that they are refusing to hear it. I am saying that they are quite literally unable to. And we should feel blessed that we have these eyes to see, but I mean, damn, what a blessing and a curse. Many times over, rats have been found to help another rat to escape from its trap once it itself is freed from its own. Once free, the rat goes out of its way to set its friend free and is happy to share what is left of the bait with him. As surprising as it sounds, perhaps us, the human species as a whole, should take a hard lesson from, well, from rats. Pointed
I like that.
That I disagree with.
All right. That's all she wrote.
I like that song.
Yeah, it's decent.
I like it too.
I feel like
Did you
it
write
wasn't
it?
complete.
No.
Oh, okay.
I feel like there could have been more. Like there should have been more. There should have been more song to that song. Is where I'm at with that.
He may have cut it. Who knows?
Like
I
I
mean,
wanted more.
his stuff's all over. What's that website he uses?
Bandcamp.
Bandcamp. Yeah, that was a Human Pollution song, I believe, unless it was The Void Stares Back. And there was Sidereal too, I think. I don't
That
know.
makes sense.
So yeah, I like how he has the book plug at the very end. Like when I got that book in the mail, I was like, "Fuck yes, let's go!" And it came with the hoodie, and it came with the coffee cup, and it came with the journal. I was like, "Fuck yeah, let's go!" And I'm reading it, and I'm like, it reads just like the videos, like just like he writes just like he speaks. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading it
Wait,
in
you got
his
a
voice.
hoodie and a cup? I have neither.
Uh-oh.
I bought all of it though. Like,
We're gonna
Oh.
have to end it there, guys.
Uh-oh.
oh shit. No, I bought it all. I purchased it from the website. So
That's my
Joey didn't
mistake.
give me any of that stuff. All right.
All right, so anything to close this off with, if we're gonna do that? 'Cause this has been going on for what?
I don't
How
know.
long?
Spooky Soul, what are your final takes?
Well, I mean, I think we can all agree that there's definitely, some kind of conditioning going on. It's not great. I don't think everybody's necessarily going to believe all the same exact thing because that would be ridiculous to believe in the first place. But like, I think as a culture, specifically in Western culture, that we're kind of waking up to these ideas that we've just been kind of getting exploited for a long ass time, and it's coming to a head at some
Yeah.
point for various reasons.
Agreed.
So let's be like mice and not guinea pigs.
Yep.
Right? Look, a rat is a worthy enemy. I'll tell you that right now. You ever try to catch a rat? You can't. You can't catch a rat. You have to just poison it. You have to just hope it takes the poison. You'd sooner catch a yard full of chickens than a fucking rat.
Just keep saying what the truth is and be true to yourself. And some people will acknowledge that and start doing it for themselves. You gotta lead, not just follow, right? And that's what I
Right.
got from this video is you've gotta look within your own moral compass and
Yeah.
lead for yourself. Society shouldn't be a trap.
I feel like Nick actually even gave us a nice way out, if you agree with it, that a lot of these systems of control only really work as well as the individual believes it does,
Mhm.
Like, if you actually stop caring about a lot of the stuff that just don't serve you, you just don't have to give in to it. At the end of the day, as addictive as, let's say, YouTube or TikTok or these other things may be, you don't actually you have the power to stop using them and to just walk away and focus on other areas of your life. But yeah.
Marcus
My thing is
Aurelius.
that when it comes to control, all you can really control is you,
Yeah.
and everything outside of you is not within your control, right? So it really comes down to the question is, are we individuals or are we sheeple, right? The herd thinking mentality and all that, the herd immunity bullshit and all that, like it's not untrue, it's just sad. You know? Like you could see it in middle schools and elementary schools. You know, I go have lunch with my kids at school and they're in 3rd and 5th grade and everybody is dressed alike. They don't go to a
Right.
private school. They don't
Yeah.
have to wear a uniform. They don't need to because they're all dressed alike anyway.
Right. All the
It's sad.
cartoon
And
shows and stuff. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
starts at a young age and you teach them by herding them and alerting them with bells and moving them, you know, all of that, assigned personalities, assigned jobs. It's just, it's very, you know, easy to break when you see it. That's where I'm at. For yourself, control what you can, which is you.
And eventually, if enough of us do that, the system will change.
Absolutely. And if you're doing
Yeah.
that now, if that's a thing that you're currently doing, join us on the Discord because we'd like to have you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Here.
Woo! All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'm gonna go.
Yep.
I've been here for like 2.5 hours. I want to be like,
Yeah.
It's been a
I'm gonna
while.
But thanks for recording, Krigon, and thanks for coming on, Soul and Spooky. I really appreciate it. This
Yeah.
was fun.
No problem.
I
Thanks
very
for
much
having
enjoy
me.
it. Till next time, thank you, podcast listeners. Join us this Friday for Joey's next drop
All
on
right.
Library of the Untold YouTube.
We'll see you next time.
Later,
Bye.
guys.